Hello and welcome back to the SameGame tutorial for Ren'Py, part 10, and let's just jump straight back into it, shall we? So in the last part of the tutorial, we created some code down here inside of the findMatches function, where we are saying, if the delete on match parameter has the value of false, then we want to run this animate on match function. And inside of this animate on match function, we are going to fill a new list, which we haven't created yet, with items from this matches list. And then we're going to use that list inside of the icons update function in order to animate them. So before we create this function, we are going to create a new list, which we are going to call icons to animate. And we're going to do that down in the start label. So we're going to scroll down. And then we're going to say icons to animate, and then we'll initialize an empty list, so we'll write 2 square brackets like so, and then we can scroll back up again, and then we're going to create a new function underneath this line, and then we'll go inwards 2 indentations, and then we're going to say def animate on match, and then we can call the argument icons. And then inside of here, in order to use and change this list that we just created, we need to make the list a global. So we're going to say global icons to animate, like so. And now we're going to iterate through the icons which we have inside of this icons parameter. So we're going to say for icon in icons, and then we're going to add each of those icons into the icons to animate list. So we're going to say icons to animate append icon, like so. And the next thing we want to do is to call the redraw method of the sprite manager object, and this will cause the icons update function that we have created up here to run. And it is inside of here that we actually want to animate the icons on the grid. So we're going to go back down into our animate on match function, and we're going to say icons dot redraw, and then we're going to put a 0 inside of there, like so. And now we'll go back up into the icons update function, and in here we're going to implement the code now to animate the icons. The first thing we need to do is to determine what kind of animation we want to give the icons. For this tutorial, I'm going to implement a sort of pulse effect, which is going to cause the icons to zoom in and zoom out whenever the user clicks on the hint button. To do that, we are first going to create a new variable, and this variable is going to help us in 2 different ways. One is to determine whether or not we are already animating the icons, and this is because the user may, for whatever reason, click on the hint button several times in a row very rapidly, and this will cause the animation to never really get to complete, and this can cause a bit of a weird or funny looking animation on the screen. So we want to try and prevent that. The second reason is that we are calling this icons update function from other parts of our script, such as down in the delete matches function down here, where we are calling the redraw method of the sprite manager object. And this will cause the update function to run, and it will run as long as the animation hasn't completed, which will also mean that the Ren'Py engine will never get to go to the next line of code, which is our shift icons function call. And this will obviously cause us problems, because when we have deleted the matches from the screen, we obviously want to shift the icons afterwards. So we want to prevent the animation from running when we are calling the redraw method in this function. So we're going to scroll back down into the start label, and we're going to create this variable, and we're going to call it is animating, and we're going to set this to the value of false to start with. So now we can go back up into the icons update function, and we're going to make this variable into a global so that we can change its values inside of this function. So we're going to say global is animating, like so. And then we're going to make another variable a global as well, which is the icons to animate list. So we're going to say global icons to animate, and then we're going to say if is animating. So as long as this is animating variable is set to true, then we can go ahead and animate our icons. So to animate the icons, we are going to loop through the icons to animate list. So we're going to say for icon in icons to animate, like so. And then we're also going to enumerate these icons to animate list so that we can get an index value for our for loop. So we're going to say enumerate, like so. And then we're going to create a new variable, which we can call I, like so. The next thing we want to do is to create a new transform. And this transform is going to take the place of the other transform that is already a child of each of the icons. So we're going to swap it with this new transform to make changes to each of the icons. So we're going to say T for transform equals transform, and the child that we're going to give this is actually going to be the hover image of the icon. And now you can see why it was good that we were giving each of the icons two different attributes, which is storing the two different images that we have given the icons. So now we can just say child is equal to icon dot hover image, like so. The next thing we need to do is to add some extra attributes to each of these icons. And these attributes are going to help us to keep track of what we have set the transforms properties to each time the icons update function runs. And that is because every time the function runs, we are creating a new transform. And since we are creating a new transform, the old properties that we set is going to disappear. And so we won't be able to use the values that we have added previously unless we keep track of what they were. So we're going to go back down into the setup icons label, and in here we're going to create these new attributes. So I'm going to copy paste this line of code, like so, and then I'm going to call the first one zoom, and we're going to set this to 0.5 since that is the default starting value. And then we're going to create the next one, and I'm going to call this one pos x, and this one is going to help us to keep track of where the icon is positioned on the screen, as we are going to be moving the icon around as well as zooming on it. And this is going to be set to the value of 0.0 for now. And then we'll create another one, which is going to be pos y, and we'll set this to 0.0 as well. And then we need to create two more attributes, and these attributes are going to help us determine whether or not we want to zoom in or zoom out in the animation. So we're going to paste, and then we're going to call this one zoom in, and this is going to be true at the start. And then the next one is going to be zoom out, and this one is going to be false at the start of the animation, like so. So now that we have that done, we are going to go back into the icons update function. And in here, we are going to decide how much do we want to enlarge the icons with the zoom property. And I found a good value to be 0.7. And since the original zoom property for the transform is 0.5, then 0.7 will be a little bit larger, but not too large. So we're going to say if icon dot zoom is less than 0.7 and icon dot zoom in is equal to true. So that means as long as the zoom attribute of the icon is less than 0.7 and the zoom in attribute is equal to true, then we can go ahead and enlarge the icon with the zoom property. So we're going to say inside of this if statement icon dot zoom plus equals 0.1. So that means that we are adding 0.1 every time this function runs for each of the icons inside of the icons to animate list. And then we also need to make sure that we are setting this zoom attributes value to the transform's zoom property so that we are actually applying the value to the transform itself. So we're going to say t dot zoom is equal to icon dot zoom, like so. And as I said before, we are doing this because just setting the zoom value to plus equal 0.1 isn't going to be remembered the next time the icons update function runs again. So that's why we have to store the value instead of an attribute like this instead, and then set the transforms property to that value. The next thing we need to do is to update the transform now that we have made changes to it, and we do that by saying t.update like so. And then we also need to set the child of this icon sprite to be this transform instead of the old transform. And to do that, we're going to say icon.set child like so. And then we're going to pass in the transform as a parameter like so. The next thing we are going to do is to create a new if statement. And this if statement is going to check if the icon's zoom property is more or equal to 0.7, and if it is, then we want to make sure that we are zooming out again towards the icon's normal zoom value, which is 0.5. So we're going to say elif icon.zoom is more or equal to 0.7, and in here we're going to make sure that we are setting the zoom in attribute to false, as we no longer want to zoom in. So we're going to say icon.zoomIn is equal to false, like so. And then we're going to say icon.zoomout is equal to true, like so. And we also want to add another condition to this elif statement. So we're going to say and icon.zoomIn is equal to true, just to make sure that this statement only runs as long as the zoom in is true and the icon's zoom attribute is more or equal to 0.7. And then we're going to create a new if statement again, and this time we're going to say elif icon.zoom is more than 0.5 and icon.zoomout is equal to true. Then we want to make sure that we are zooming out the icon. So we're going to say icon.zoom minus equals 0.1, and then we're going to do the same thing as before. t.zoom is equal to icon.zoom, and then t update and icon set child to t, like so. The last statement that we are going to create is going to be an else statement. So as long as none of these statements above is true, then the else statement will run, and therefore the animation has completed. So we're going to say else, and in here we're going to reset the zoom attributes for the icon. So we're going to say icon.zoomout is equal to false, and then we're going to set icon.zoomIn to true, because the next time we run this function, we want the animation to start from the beginning again by zooming in. So we're setting the zoom in to true and the zoom out to false. And then we want to make sure that the icon's image is set back to the idle image. So we're going to say t.child is equal to icon.idleImage, like so. And then we also have to say t.update to update the transform, and then we're going to set the child of the icon to be this transform. So we're going to say icon.set child and then add t as the parameter. Now, to prevent the animation from running again for any of these icons, we are going to pop them or delete them from the icons to animate list as the animation has finished. So we're going to say icons to animate dot pop, and then we're going to add the I variable as a parameter, which is the index number of the for loop. So the next thing we need to do is to make sure that we are checking if this icons to animate list does not have 0 items in it, and if it doesn't, then we can go ahead and return to this function again immediately so that it can finish the rest of the animations for the icons. But if it does have 0 items in it, then that means that the animations has completed and therefore the icons to animate list is empty. So we're going to create a few empty lines, and then we're going to go inwards to indentations like so, and we're going to say if len icons to animate does not equal to 0. And then we're going to say inside of this return 0, which means that it will return in 0 seconds to this function again. And then we're going to say else return none, which means that it will not return this function once this function has run its code and this statement is not true. So now let's go through this code again, just so that we can understand a bit better what's actually happening here. So up here we have created this for loop, and this for loop is iterating through each of the icons in the icons to animate list. And then we are creating a new transform inside of this for loop, and we're setting the transform's child to be the hover image of the current icon in the for loop. And then we're saying if the icon's zoom attribute is less than 0.7, then we can go ahead and add 0.1 to its value. So that means that since the zoom attribute was set to 0.5 as a default value, it is now going to be 0.6 since we added 0.1 to that value. And then we are saying that the zoom property of the transform should be equal to that value, and then we're updating the transform, and then we're setting the icon sprite's child to that transform. And then the Ren'Py engine will go to the next statement, and this will not run because it's an else if statement, and since the first if statement ran, this will not run, and neither will these two other statements down here. And then the for loop will run again because we reached the end of the for loop and we still have icons to iterate through. So now it goes to the second icon in the icons to animate list, and it creates a new transform again. And then we're checking, is this icon's zoom attribute value less than 0.7, which it is, so it's going to add 0.1 to that as well. And now this one is going to be 0.6 also. And this is going to continue until all of the icons in the list has gotten 0.1 added to its zoom attribute value. So once all of the icons have gotten the zoom attribute value of 0.6 and this function runs again, then this statement is going to be true, and the zoom in attribute value is going to be set to false, and the zoom out is going to be set to true. And then again, when the function runs again later on, then this else if statement is going to be true, and this time all of the icons are going to be zoomed out instead. And then the last else statement is going to run eventually, where all of the icons are going to be popped from the icons to animate list, which means that it's now empty. And that also means that this return none statement is going to run, which means that this function will not automatically run again until we press the hint button again. Now, one thing that you may have noticed with this animation is that it's going to run pretty quickly, and that is because we're adding 0.1 to the zoom attribute value, and to reach 0.7 from 0.5 by adding 0.1 each time is only going to require this function to run twice, and so that means that the animation is going to be pretty fast on the screen, and this may not be what we want. And so to slow this down a bit, to make the animation more observable for a little bit longer, we could just add a smaller amount to this icon zoom attribute value. So for example, we could say 0.01 or 0.05 for example. So let's go ahead and change it to 0.05 for now to see what this is going to look like inside of the game. And let's do the same thing down here, like so. And now we also want to make sure that we are returning none in case this is animating variable is set to false, so that this for loop doesn't run and try to animate the icons when we don't want it to. So we're going to create an empty line underneath here, and then we're going to go in to indentations like so, and then we're going to say else return none like so. So now if we were to run the game to see how this animation is working when we hit the hint button, we wouldn't be able to tell that anything is happening. And that is because we haven't yet set this is animating variable to true. So to do that, we are going to go back into the animate unmatch function. So we're going to scroll down until we find it down here. And we're going to make the variable into a global. So we're going to say global is animating, and then we're going to set it to true down here. So we're going to say is animating is equal to true, like so. So now that we have that done, there is one more thing that we need to do, and that is going to be down in the SameGame screen. So we're going to scroll down until we find it. Down here. And what we want to do here is to make sure that this hint function only runs if the isAnimating variable is set to false. And that is because if it's set to true, then that means that the animation is already running, and we don't want the user to be allowed to press the hint button again to interrupt this animation in case they decide to press the hint button several times in a row rapidly, which I said before is going to cause a bit of a weird looking animation. So we're going to wrap this function in an if function. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to add 2 brackets around it, like so. And then in front of this, we're going to say is animating is equal to false. And if it's true, so if it's true that the isAnimating variable is set to false, then we're going to allow this hint button to be pressed. So we're going to keep this function right there. And then we're going to say, but if it's false, which means that the isAnimating variable is set to true, then we're going to add a null action as the action so that the animation does not run again. And now we actually want to go back into the icons update function. So we're going to scroll all the way back up. And in here, there is a few things I'd like us to add and fix. The first thing is that this idle image is supposed to say idle underscore image, like so, but you may have already written this the correct way. The second thing is that we want to reset the isAnimating variable to false once all of the icons has finished animating, and we're going to do that inside of this else statement. So we're going to say isAnimating is equal to false, like so. The next thing we need to do is to make sure that we are setting the zoom property for the transform inside of this else statement to 0.5 to make sure that the icon is showing at half the size instead of its original resolution, which is twice as big. So we're going to say t.zoom is equal to 0.5, like so. So now that we have added all of the necessary code that we need in order to animate these icons when the user hits the hint button, we can go ahead and save our changes and launch the game to see what this looks like. So here inside of the game, we are going to test the animation by clicking on the hint button to see if any groups of icons on the grid is going to animate. So let's try it. And as we can see, it does indeed seem to work, as this group right here is animating when we click on the hint button. Let's try it again. So as we can see, it animates as it should every time we hit the hint button. However, it does go a little bit too fast when we click it. So to fix that, we are going to go back into the code and slow the animation down a little bit so that it looks a little bit better. So to slow down the animation, we are going to change these 2 values right here to something even lower than it is right now. So let's try, for example, 0.01, like so, and then we'll save and see what this looks like. So now let's go ahead and press the hint button again to see if the animation is any slower. And as we can see, it does indeed look a bit better now as it's animating slower. But we can also see another thing happening, and that is that the zoom seems to be happening from the upper left corner of the icons. So right here for this icon, for example. And that means that the icons aren't really zooming in from its center point inside of the grid cells, which I think will look a bit better. So in order to fix that, we're going to go back into the code and implement that. So if you remember, we have also created 2 other attributes for the icons, which we have called posX and posY. And it is now that we want to use these attributes in order to offset the icons' positions on the screen. And as I said before, the icons are zooming based on the top left corner of their bounding boxes, and that means that the very bottom right corner of the bounding boxes is expanding outwards in order to make the icons larger. So to make the icons look like they're zooming in from the center, we need to offset the icons' position from the top left corner of their bounding boxes to the left and up. So in order to do that, we are going to go to this first if statement, and we're going to create a new line underneath this piece of code right here. And then we're going to say icon dot pos x minus equals to 0.5, and then we're going to do the same thing with the pos y. So we're going to say icon dot pos y minus equals 0.5, like so. And then we also need to make sure that we are applying these values to the icons x and y attributes so that the icons are actually moving. So we're going to say icon dot x is equal to icon dot pos x, and icon dot y is equal to icon dot pos y. And then we can go ahead and copy paste these lines of codes into the other section, which is down here. So we're going to create a new line and paste it into here. And then we want to make sure that we are switching these minuses to pluses instead, so that we are moving the icons back into their original positions. So we're going to say plus and plus, like so. But now there's also one more important thing that we need to think about, and that is inside of the SameGame screen where we are adding and positioning the icons. Because what's going to happen is every time we're running the redraw method of the sprite manager object, not only does this icons update function get called, but the screens that we have added to the game is also going to be redrawn or refreshed, and that means that the icons are going to be added again to the screen together with their positioning values. And that also means that eventually the icons positions are going to revert back to the old position before the animation has completed, and so the animation is going to look quite glitchy and jumpy. So in order to make this work, we have to go back into the SameGame screen and add some code which is going to help us to fix this. So we're going to scroll back down into the SameGame screen, down here, and in here we want to make sure that we are checking if the isAnimating variable is set to false, and if it is, then we can go ahead and position these icons according to the XP and YP variables. So we're going to say if not isAnimating, and then we're going to indent these two lines, like so. And then we're also going to give the pos x and the pos y attributes that we have given the icons the same values. So we're going to say icon dot pos x is equal to xp, and icon dot pos y is equal to yp, like so. So that means that when the game starts or when the screen is refreshed, and as long as the icons are not animating, then the icons position is going to be xp and yp, and we are setting the pos x and pos y to these values as well, just to make sure that when we are repositioning them inside of the update function, we have the correct values to start with instead of the 0.0 values that we have added inside of the setup icons label. And then we're going to add an else statement. So we're going to say else, and in this case we want to make sure that the icons are positioned according to the pos x and pos y values instead of the xp and yp values. So we're going to say icon dot x is equal to icon dot pos x, and icon dot y is equal to icon dot pos y, like so. So now if the isAnimating variable is set to true, and therefore we are wanting to animate the icons, then the icons positions is going to be based on the values that we have put inside of the pos x and pos y attributes, and therefore the animations should work correctly. So now that we are back inside of the game again, we are going to press the hint button to see if our icons are going to animate in the correct way. And as we can see, it does indeed seem to be animating in the correct way, as the icons are zooming in from their center points instead of the top left corner. So now that we have that done, we are going to continue in the next part, where we are going to implement a game over screen, which is going to be triggered whenever the time is up or there are no more possible matches. And that is also going to be the last part of this tutorial, which I know many of you are going to be very happy about, since you're looking forward to some of the other upcoming tutorials, such as the inventory system. So I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next part.